So, with that said, let's go into our main topic as we plan to talk about the housing crisis in America. To kind of start off, how would you explain the housing market to the people? Obviously, people know you got to buy homes, people know what mortgages are, but like, how would you explain this current condition of the housing market, especially compared to, the past?
I think right now, I hear, and I don't have a lot of research behind this. I hear that houses were significantly cheaper to build in the past, which resulted in them being significantly easier to afford, especially labor. But everything has gone up in price in terms of the construction end of a home. That's what's kind of driving up the prices a bit. Also, we have Fed policy that's causing massive issues. So people on the left and the right, I've heard even people like Stephen Crowder talking about this. BlackRock going in, buying up a bunch of homes, holding on to them until the property value raises due to the lack of supply of more homes, and then reselling those homes back to the market or back to the Fed for that extra rate and just earning money off of nothing but rent seeking. And it's causing the housing market to suck for average people, especially first time homeowners that don't have that equity to invest in these much higher houses. I'd say right now we're seeing in a lot of the country, a lot of rural areas, no changes at all. I'd say a lot of these changes have to do with more populated areas. We're seeing kind of a lot of corruption in housing.
So yeah, that's definitely what I'm seeing now in terms of the housing market as well. And a lot of people don't really know how to kind of deal with the situation. As of right now, there's a constant expectation that a housing market crash will eventually happen. But as we've seen, the prices just keep on going up and up and up. I've seen one video saying that Warren Buffett is still very much invested into the housing market. And with that said, if it keeps on going up, obviously more and more people won't be able to afford homes. Uh, why do you think that the housing market prices just keep on rising?
Well, from what I've seen evidence wise, again, the cost of everything, cost of lumber, cost of land, cost of labor has all risen. And labor, especially, we have less people building homes, we have more consolidated, larger groups. So, regulatory capture is a concept in economics where the more regulation, even safety regulation with good intent, I'm not saying regulation is bad, but the more regulation we pass around a certain market, the harder it is for a smaller business to get involved in that market. And this allows a lot of the market share to be passed to these bigger companies. Over a long period of time, all these small companies start dropping out of that marketplace, and we see oligopolies form. And when those form, they start to maybe not make deals because that's illegal, it's considered a cartel, but they start to maybe segment off parts of the country where they won't get much competition from other countries. You see with cable companies, they don't compete very much in certain areas. Some areas you can get Xfinity, and some areas you can't. You see that I see that in other sectors as well. As these smaller markets get pushed out, larger markets come in, they start taking territory, and then they can start charging whatever the hell they want because of that lack of competition. As well, again, BlackRock and bad Fed policy driving up policy as well, or pricing as well. Interest rates going up because of inflation is another big one right now. We're sitting at an interest rate we haven't seen since 2002, and it did flow a lot back before the 2010s. It would flow up and down a lot, but it would fluctuate between like 2 and 6%. It would get up to 8 and 10 every now and then, but our interest rates right now are sitting consistently at 8, not going back down. That is also really affecting housing prices, unless you're in a locked-in mortgage.
Do you think this is would have been like a natural trend, or do you think a large part of it had to do with COVID and what COVID did to the economy at large throughout the entire world?
It's place to place. If you look at places like Florida and Houston, you see houses being built to almost keep up with their influx of people. If you look at other areas, though, like other cities, you can see New York City has grown over the last 10 years. They're having trouble finding housing for everybody that's there. They're seeing the prices of the housing rise because of the lack of supply with the increase in demand. It really depends. There's a concept I heard a lot about housing in California. It's called NIMBYism, not in my backyard. They don't want affordable housing being built next to them. These people, in their mind, worked hard to get into a nice neighborhood so their kids can be raised away from crime and good schools, etc. So they don't want low income people in those neighborhoods. And it creates zoning laws. These are the highest donators and the most outspoken people in politics. They're the ones that call the congressman when they want something done and control a good chunk of a vote in these smaller elections, so they can actually get these politicians to move that affordable housing elsewhere, causing prices to go up everywhere for housing in general. And that's kind of what my plan when we get into it. My proposal for right wing affordable housing kind of addresses that to a certain degree.
All right. Well, yeah, let's hear that plan and see if we can kind of break it apart throughout the discussion. So, yeah, what is your proposal in kind of dealing with this housing crisis moving forward?
Well, the video I made on this is over an hour long of me just rambling on and on about all these different subjects pertaining to this. So, the easy and quick way I sum it up in the video and generally is Trump's idea for opportunity zones, where he would take an area in the inner city, he would cut taxes, he would give all sorts of incentives for businesses to move in. I kind of want to piggyback off that idea, but I want to do depopulation zones. I want to take people out of the city and move them into more rural areas, growing these small towns up a little bit, not adding too many people, not upsetting their little hegemonious community, but also with competitive districts in mind. So if you have an area that votes 70% GOP, you start moving in some city Democrats, not enough to upset the flow of their town, but enough to make it a competitive district. With that, we start doing government housing. So in the United States right now, a 600 square foot home costs about $50,000 to $70,000 to build fresh. All cost, labor, everything, expenses, all the licenses you need. If we take that and we move it to an area with cheaper housing, cheaper lumber, cheaper fuel, because it's a less populated area, then and we're building in bulk, we can get those prices down significantly more. Then we start doing a government lending program for 1%, and we give first time homeowners an opportunity to move to an area. Now, a lot of people want to live in the city because that's where the jobs are, that's where the fun is. So, in order to get these housing areas to work, we also have to bring in local businesses that we would give tax cuts to and incentives to get them to move into that area, as well as we want to bring in entertainment to make sure people don't want to just go back to the city. And that would see city housing prices drop just naturally. You would need less rent assistance, so you could take some of the money from rent assistance and mortgage assistance and push it over to these people, because with rent dropping naturally due to less demand in cities, less rent assistance is needed. So I really feel like we could free up a lot of money by doing something like this and have it fully paid for by the people getting the loans.
Okay. So yeah, let's try to break this up a little bit. So to kind of start off, when it comes to the individuals and kind of moving them from these overpopulated areas, typically urban areas, city areas, of course, to these more, rural areas that you're referring to the point where, you're not populating it enough for it to be gentrified, of course. How do you incentivize these people to move from their home to a different home? I know you mentioned jobs, so that's one factor. But yeah, kind of go through your approach on how to convince these people.
So that would be a first-time homeowners. You give them some sort of incentive, and we have mechanisms we already use in place to attract businesses to certain areas. Hey, if you come and put your business here, we'll cut your corporate tax rate to zero for the first 10 years and help you pay for the infrastructure you need in order to, like, we'll build you a nice private road and blah blah blah, so you can get this all set up. That's how you get businesses in there. When the jobs are there and affordable home ownership opportunities are there, young people will come. I feel like that's the easiest part, is convincing people to move to these growing cities. I live in a growing city. It's gained about 500,000 people over the last decade due to one nuclear power plant and one military base that does, I think, the biggest cyber technology in the country. People just fluctuated this area to blow it up, and just witnessing it firsthand, I thought if we could turn something like this into policy, make it take this organic process and turn it into policy, we could start moving people out of cities. There's an idea in statistics that there's a reversion to the mean. You'll see new stuff come out and people will go flock to that new thing, but over 10 years, they'll start to come back to the normal trends. And I feel like we are about to revert to the mean post COVID of people moving out of cities. And with 66% homeownership in the US right now, we definitely have some room for first time and homeowners generally to get some new houses. I really feel like convincing people to move would be the easiest step once you get everything else in place.
Interesting. I definitely see the logic in terms of appealing to the need of work. I mean, that's pretty apparent from my point of view at the very least. But with that said, especially like young people who move to the city, it seems to me that there is definitely a different type of appeal to kind of be there. Right? Obviously people who are like on the lower income who are kind of stuck there. We can kind of think a lot of families that are living there based off circumstance versus based off, want or even need to an extent of being there, versus like the other individuals who kind of live in the city based off opportunity. Like we know we can probably think of a lot of people who kind of move over to a place like San Francisco, LA, New York City, or even like the other areas around New York City, go to maybe even Manhattan. And we probably can name other kind of big cities throughout some of the more bigger states that exist. And the move there obviously is job related, and those jobs that they are moving towards are going to are jobs that are specifically those areas. You won't be able to move them or transfer them over to a rural area for obvious reasons. And other potential opportunities, whether it's like networking or quality of life, because there are certain things cities will have that rural areas will never have. So the appeal to those people won't be jobs. They're living there strictly for opportunity, basically. So is the assumption that we're not trying to convince those individuals who are going to the city in the first place, but trying to convince the people who are already kind of like in the lower threshold economically in terms of income, and trying to get them to a place that's a little bit more suitable to their needs?
I'd say the latter is who you really want to appeal to. If somebody wants to work in a tech company and Silicon Valley is their best place to do that, they're going to move to Silicon Valley. We can never compete with that. We can never replicate that. We're not going to try to. The reason why those tech companies are right there is because they're closer to some cables, I guess, that's push the internet over into Asia, and that's why they picked that spot in particular. And so the geological location of that is something that's advantageous to those particular companies. You're never going to be able to move those people out. What they would be is the 80% that stay in the city. You only need 20% of the city to move out. I think focusing on the people that can't afford to be there as much would definitely help. Um, Young people in general too. A lot of them do go to the city, and that's the entertainment thing I've tried to bring up in excitement. You're not going to win them all. I had to move to Dallas and live there for a while in the city to realize that city life wasn't for me. The value of humanity, like when you have a bunch of people clumped together like that, they start each individual human being matters less. Instead of seeing a car accident and saying, "Oh, that's my buddy's uncle," you see a car accident and say, "This mother effer is in the way when I'm trying to get to work." And I think that getting people out of cities into an area, there's also studies that look at people's happiness as opposed to how dense the area they're living in is. So what you're saying is like there's not enough excitement, there's not enough draw to keep young people there. Absolutely agree with you, but at a certain point when it gets too dense, it's also not appealing to most people in that as well. We have to kind of work toward a middle ground. So you might want to start with a couple already growing cities. Like I'm in Augusta. Augusta would be one of them you'd want to start this policy with to try to bring this influx of people in due to the city already naturally growing. And as you analyze that process, kind of work out from there. This place also lacks entertainment a bit. People come here for work, and it seems like as soon as they make it, they leave for somewhere more exciting. Local sports teams. When I lived in Buffalo, they would do like things in the park all the time. You'd have to get some community organization for entertainment and get that bump in a bit. I don't know. I really like. There's nothing that can match the city experience. This is more for people that once they hit 30 and they're thinking about buying their own home, or they have a family that they want to have a home for and live in a nice community away from a crime-ridden neighborhood or something like that. That's kind of who I'm trying to target is the people starting a family.
Okay. Um. So with that said, uh we talked about the demographic of people who be most likely to move. Can you explain a little bit more in depthly in terms of the city obviously losing the individuals that they lose to the rural areas? One thing that we realize in these locales that you're referring to is that there are homes that they just can't buy for a number of reasons that you reference, of course. So all these locations that they can't buy up or they can't even afford to rent out, of course, in the city themselves. With the decreased amount of people that are in the city, how exactly are they? How exactly is the city benefiting from the less people in that area to the point where they can potentially start buying homes? How does that equation work for the city necessarily?
I couldn't tell you exactly. I could just tell you generally, as we have some overcrowding in a lot of cities, and if they have those zoning laws I was talking about before, they are currently unable to keep up with the demands for housing. That's why the price of housing is going up. If there's a higher demand than supply, the cost to rent goes up because somebody will pay it, and then if somebody won't pay it, the cost of rent will drop. It's more complicated than that, obviously. That's just a general summary of it.
Right.
So it would benefit the city in I'm not sure if it would really benefit the city much at all. It would just stop some of the overcrowding and overpopulation problems that they're seeing as a result. They just it would free things up. It would lower the cost of living in those areas, which would make people happier. Some of these more dense areas where people tend to be more angry or less humane due to the com- the compact nature of how many people are in these small areas, they would probably lighten up a little bit. New Yorkers might be a little happier. Um, can't guarantee that, but I think the overall benefit for the city would be that'd probably be the party that benefits the least. The parties that would benefit for the most would be these small towns and the homeowners, probably.
So, what do you say about the homeless situation, right? The people who are on the streets that are homeless for a variety of reasons, of course. Is your proposal taking them into account in the equation?
I do. I have two paragraphs about that, and I break homeless down into three categories. You got your economically homeless, which are the people that this would target directly. Those are the ones we would try to get into homes. Those are the ones we would try to recover. A lot of people just can't afford living in cars. I think I want to say like one third of homeless are just economically homeless. There's no mental issues. There's no drug addiction issues. The other two categories I don't really want to dig into too much because I don't go into them in this policy. And I don't have a solution for them in here. Like if somebody's homeless because they have mental issues, or if somebody's homeless because they're a drug addict, I think that we have systems in place. We could probably add more for them. They're not really mentioned in my housing policy, unfortunately, just the economic homeless. And those, I do have a couple plans in here. Try to figure out why they're homeless. If it's just the fact that they can't afford to live in the area that they're at. Places like West Virginia have proposals where they'll pay somebody almost up to five figures to move to West Virginia, keep your remote job, and work your remote job while living in West Virginia. We could emulate something like that. We could say, hey, we're going to give you a good chunk of change and help you with the down. There's no down payment. You just start paying 1%, and we have like five jobs for you to choose from that are brand new factories that are just built in this town that we're trying to work on and grow. Go on out there. Your cost of living will be lower. Your gas will be half as much. All your expenses, your food, everything's going to plummet, and your mortgage is only going to be $700 a month. So go do that. You won't live in the city, but you'll have a home. And I really think that would appeal to a lot of people, economically homeless, young people, things like that.
And not gonna lie, that appeals to me. But I have a reason to be down here, so I can't just leave. So, but if I didn't have a reason to go in there, you know what I'm saying? That sounds like a great plan, honestly. Um, So okay, so we kind of covered the homeless situation. I definitely think a program, as you mentioned, could definitely be beneficial for them to kind of move to these kind of rural areas, these small town areas. How do you determine the threshold of potential over not overpopulation, but like maximum population to the point where they potentially are not gentrifying the area? Because we see it like perfect example, if you guys watch South Park, right, we've seen in the South Park episodes where they were changing their South Park town into a more sophisticated area, and see how gentrified it got after they added the Whole Foods and a bunch of other kind of um, amenities, of course. So that tends to happen once you bring new businesses in, bring new perspectives and cultures in. And from what you said earlier, you're trying to make sure that there's a limit, so it's not overdoing it for these towns, because there's still a lot of these towns. There's an appeal to kind of stay who they are for the most part, right? So how do you kind of determine what that percentage is for new people?
That I don't have an answer for. My general guess was that the population over time, you can't bring in more than like 2 to 3% population increase in a town over maybe a couple of years. You don't want to go too fast with it. You don't want to piss off the locals. Things like, you don't want to raise their cost of living. The more people influx in, sometimes the higher the cost of living will get. You don't want to upset what you already have there. So I don't know enough about some of these subjects, and I say that in my video. There's a lot of things that are a bit over my head here. I would like to get somebody that's maybe a zoning expert to talk to sit down and say, hey, how can this can be practically constructed? Maybe somebody that deals with economics and housing to sit down and talk with and find somebody. There's a lot of holes that I still need to fill in this policy. I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately. I need a professional in the actual field that we're talking about to come scrutinize my plan.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All kind of solutions kind of start with an idea, and I definitely see hearing a lot of the logic that comes from it in terms of appealing to growing these areas in importance, because with everything said, with trying not to kind of piss off these rural areas at the same time, there is a recognition that we don't really talk about rural areas in politics. They're not a part of the conversation. One of the reasons why is there's not a strong enough community to appeal to politically. They have no relevance to an extent towards policy because they are rural areas. So a growth in you know population, a growth in local economy from that specific area also grows their importance, their value to the state and to the country as whole. It would give them an opportunity to create better schools, because no matter how bad you think city schools are, I guarantee rural schools are nowhere near better. Better schools, better services, medically, better police department, obviously. So even though there's a certain level of like cultural understanding, whether or not people think gentrification is good or bad, or kind of trying to appeal to these differences of people to the point where you don't want to be in danger if you're a new person that's going in this rural area, there needs to be an understanding that growth in this area is growth for everybody there as well. So there's some things there that can benefit not only the people, but like you said, the rural areas as well. With that said, when it comes down to appealing to the businesses that you're referring to before, having them come and kind of migrate to these areas, I know you mentioned a few kind of proposals on how the government can appeal to the businesses, but can you go into a little bit more depth, especially the potential concerns that the supply and demand may not be there for these local businesses?
Now, it depends on how. See, this is something I'm kind of wrestling around with because I am not a fan of planned economies, but I feel like the more planning you put into this, the better it could be for these businesses. Let's say you have a tech company that wants to participate in the program and they want to go here. The best thing for them would try to be to attract people that would fit into that tech company. So you tell that business, we're going to be looking for people that would actually be able to work for you in this specific area. Now, oh my dog. Now, somewhere like Georgia, they actually teach as a foreign language computer programming languages. So you can learn Java, Python, or PHP or something like that. in high school in Georgia, and I think it's a really great thing they did down here for that. And you could use that to attract the business. Look, you come into this area, 25% of these kids coming out of high school know Java. They could go ahead and write you an object oriented method right now, and they would require minimal on site training. They just need to be brought up to speed for what you do. You could tell them that because like a lot of businesses have trouble hiring, they have to hire firms to do it for them. They're all on these websites like LinkedIn and Indeed, constantly looking for the best person. If you tell them this plan could help funnel those people to you, it would really pull a lot of businesses. And I feel like, as well as the tried and true method of cutting taxes, Amazon going to New York before AOC raised a big stink about it and got the tax cut taken away. Amazon was getting an offer to get like their corporate taxes paid for if they went to New York for an X amount of years, and that would be something else that we already do to attract businesses to certain areas. Give them incentives. There's a lot of incentives. You could say you're going to help them pay for the infrastructure again. We'll pave you a private road. We'll put down the foundation for the building. You build your building up on top of it and go from there, or something like that. Funding, like the CHIPS bill, something similar to that, maybe.
Okay, so with that said, there's a lot of things that I think that definitely would appeal to the businesses that you're referring to. Um, my only thing is I think this will kind of help kind of demonstrate the businesses a little bit more for people who are listening. Is what businesses do you think you can truly appeal to that will be able to be successful migrating to a rural area?
Well, let's see in terms of the city. So right now, the city has a certain amount of supply and demand in terms of certain goods and services. If 20% of people, let's say hypothetically, are moving out of that city, to keep these businesses sustained, about 20% of those businesses might potentially also have to move out of the city. The fact that you have that potential, to move some of these companies to where there could be enough business for them to have a profitable market would appeal. That's really the bottom line. That's really all you have to appeal to. It's the risk of them moving out there that you're going to have to absolve them of by maybe promising to help them out with funding or things like that. Hold on, I got this toy.
No worries, no worries.
Um, so I feel like a lot of businesses that would be successful, again, if you told a tech company, we're going to get you an area, we're going to start bringing in programmers, people that know, people that you would need to fill your roster, and you're going to have 3 or 4 tech companies out there with you. We're going to turn into a little tech town, kind of like Hershey's Chocolate Town. This will be one similar to Silicon Valley for remote tech workers. You could get those. I only bring up tech because it's the field I work in. So you could get, let's say you need object-oriented programmers, you could get people that know how to write in Java, Python, and things like that to come move out there looking for these jobs. And then hopefully it would come together in that regard. It would take some time. And again, I need some expert help. I need a zoning person or something to come in. Also, another factor I didn't get to throw in yet, so there's new designing for homes that helps seal in heat and cooling to cause them to put off less carbon emissions. So for the climate change argument, you could have this new standard of home being the one that's being built. And if you're shopping for your goods and building in a place that's like Essex County in California is only 1 to 2% higher than the national average in terms of cost of living, whereas LA County is about 40 to 50% higher. If you're building this home in LA County, it might cost you $100,000, where if you build it in Essex, it's only going to cost you 60. I feel like on a grand scale, you tell businesses that it's cheaper for you to build there, cheaper for you to run your business there, and you can run the whole damn thing remotely in today's age. You could probably get a lot. It would have to be businesses that work online. The service industries and such would fill themselves in after. You would need, if someone says, oh, they need a fine dining restaurant out there. That's the opportunity that would create itself, essentially. Close my door. No, up now. You
Yeah, that
little asshole.
dog is loving the squeaky toy.
She's a shelter dog, so she's a little attention needy. Nope, you know we're not there.
Um, so I do think like certain job or businesses can definitely translate in a lot of areas pretty efficiently. Like the tech that you're referring to, I could see them translating. I don't see like they're being a huge kind of hurdle for those individuals. Like you just got to make sure you got the internet and the right personnel there, obviously. The I guess the ones is like the service, or like the some of the potential harder ones, or ones that kind of distribute kind of goods and services to an extent, right? So if you got a location that kind of sells products, kind of like a little mini market, there's no guarantee that the local community will care about what you're selling, right? And I guess another kind of potential worry for certain individuals that maybe, or maybe a food place, is um how are you going to be able to get your goods effectively transported consistently? Because obviously, transporting goods to a city is way more efficient for that type of company versus transporting it to a rural area, of course. Um, so there's probably a lot of logistics behind that. I guess the one thing that you can kind of put in their favor is, even though some of the maybe sales will be lower based off the area they're living in and potential incentives that they're giving, they still will be able to make a profit based off their location. So that could be a potential thing that they that can work in their favor, of course. Um, so with that said, the the scare of appealing to kind of foreign individuals basically is always potentially troubling for a business owner, especially since we know a rural area is not going to be as multicultural as the city. Like there's less opportunity to appeal to people because they're a little bit more closeted into whatever way of life that they're living at. How would you feel about some type of program? I don't know if this exists or not, that they can kind of potentially experiment with the clientele in that rural area to see if their business could translate properly at, for a certain amount of time. Do you think that would help alleviate potentially any unease for some of these businesses?
Absolutely, I think that already exists. I think that these companies, like I know Walmart has already worked out that equation that you're talking about. They need a certain amount of people in a certain amount of economic bracket for a Walmart to be profitable in that area. And as soon as you pass that threshold, a Walmart pops up and things like that. Once you have a certain amount of people that maybe are in the upper class bracket, a Whole Foods pops up. So I think they've already mapped out a lot of those equations. They know who their demographics are. It's more, I think it's more in the onus of the business owners, especially some of these bigger firms, to figure out the clientele. And I think they already have decades ago, and they have it down to a science at this point. I've seen some of the numbers on it. I don't have any reference offhand, but I really feel like if you can get those people to that area and some of those startup jobs to that area, the growth cycle will start to pick up on its own. And again, with service industry jobs, like if there's a niche that's not filled in a town, I live in an area there was no real fine dining restaurants. So some people noticed that they opened up 3 fine dining restaurants. All of them popped off. They're all massive now, just because there was a lack of that good or service. It's kind of the whole idea of competition where there's a need for something, somebody will step up and give that need. And if your firm isn't giving that need, your competitor will step up and do it for you. So some of these highly competitive sectors, I think they will take care of themselves. It's more the oligopoly sectors that are going to be a little tougher to work with, as well as transportation. A lot of these areas I'm talking about are the drive-through states where those goods and products already drive through those states, already drive by those towns, maybe 100 miles away. They just pass right by them. Now they'd stop there. So I feel like we already have the infrastructure in place to get those things to these areas. It's just they just don't need to. They go from New York to LA, and then from LA they get distributed out into the smaller districts, and you could more do that on the way with bigger spots along the way just to drop them off at.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. All right, so I guess the last prong we want to touch upon from this proposal a little bit more in depth is, we talked a lot about, the individuals, the businesses, the translating to these rural areas, but overall the conversation is about, you know decreasing market prices, right? The housing market prices, making it easier for people to afford homes in the first place. So, can you go in a little bit more in depth on, how this solution properly translates to these individuals being able to, afford their homes for the market price shrinking, and how that would help, the country overall?
So it wouldn't help some cities. Some cities already have areas where it's pretty low cost of living for a city. If you look at Dallas versus Seattle, it's about 2.5 times more expensive to live in Seattle. I think this would help a lot of younger people that haven't made it yet, in the regard of, again, I kind of brought up how Essex County is only like 2% above the national average in terms of cost of living, where LA County is 50% above the national average. It's a huge spike in how much, like if the cost of living in, let's say, is $10,000 in Essex, that means it's 15,000 in LA. If you're building these houses in this cheaper area, you're already saving money on land and goods and expenses. As well, if the government's buying in huge bulk and paying in huge bulk, yeah, sure, it might cost you $20,000 to get the labor to build this one house. But if you tell them, hey, we need 100 houses, and we want those at 15,000 a piece, you just save $5,000 in every house hypothetically. So you're using this giant plan to cut down on overall expenses by buying in bulk, and that could be directly passed on. Now there is some high risk lending, and I worked in car sales for a while before I went back to school, and I saw like people with better credit got lower APRs. I'd want the bottom rate of that APR to only be 1%. For a low risk loan, you're only paying the government 1% interest to make up for inflation, and that's it. And otherwise, the government's it's going to be kind of a nonprofit program where the government's only paid back for the tax money they spend. And then turning around, you have some people that are a little higher risk. Maybe they had a car repossessed or something like that. I would want to see only the top end of this loan APR only be about 5% for the high risk loans. And we have all sorts of programs. They're going to have to pay it back eventually, even if we have to take it out of their taxes. So if they can't pay their mortgage this month, we don't turn around and evict them. We now are running this through the government, so we can give people all sorts of programs to work with the government to pay this off. We could, since it's such a low interest rate, unlike college loans, if you froze their payments for a year, it wouldn't be this huge impact that you saw with freezing the loan payments for COVID, where people's interest rate was still building and building and building. They added $30,000 to their loan amount when they weren't paying a cent. This would keep it so low that it would still add a little bit, but it only to compensate for inflation. You could not pay your, let's say somebody in your family got sick, your government program decides, hey, you don't have to pay your mortgage for a year because you're out of work, your family member's sick, they're on disability, blah blah blah. We could find ways to make it easier for people that are financially struggling to still continue to pay their mortgage through these programs.
So, I definitely see some logic regarding it, in decreasing certain, like, you know costs based off the, building of homes, and how that could obviously benefit in the overall, um decrease in market price, of course. How do you prevent some of these companies that we refer to, such as BlackRock, from buying these new homes in these rural areas?
First time homeowner policies, a lot of these policies are directed at first time homeowners or people. You can't be above a certain threshold. We don't want BlackRock doing it, but we also don't want rich people just coming in and buying 3 homes to jack up the price and resell them. We need to make sure to have something written into the policy to make these homes flip proof, maybe for 20 years. And then after the houses started to degrade in quality, that's when somebody comes in, renovates the home or whatever. So maybe the first 20 years of these homes being built, only first time homeowners can get into them. And then maybe they can be resold after that or something like that. But there has to be something written into the policy to make sure that large firms don't come in and just suck this property all up and turn around and resell it at their will. Not only will that ruin the policy because they will come in and just start finding the first buyer they can find. Maybe not somebody that would acclimate into the businesses you brought into that area, or maybe not somebody, maybe they would sell to 80% Republicans and flip a district around where I want competitive district laws. We see some in different states, like they want to keep their districts 60-40 at worst, closer to 50-50 if possible. That'd be one of my goals when you're allocating people to these districts and trying to get them in there. Hey, I want to apply for this government program, and here's my skill set. Okay, we got four different locations in three different states we could move you to, or maybe all in this state that all would fit your skill set. There's several jobs in each one that you could work at. This one right here is the cheapest cost of living. This one right here has the most job opportunities, and you can move people to there. And that way, if somebody like BlackRock wanted to come in, they'd have to deal with somebody at the government saying, sorry, you're too big. You're not an individual with a skill set looking for their first home. You're a firm looking to rent seek and artificially jack up prices. Go after yourself.
All right, fair enough. I find the solution very interesting. I could definitely see certain appeals to it. Um, on the long run, not only can it definitely benefit the housing market, prices potentially help it go down, but overall, I think it definitely can improve the rural areas, give a lot of people that are on the lower spectrum of income in these cities a better opportunity in different locations. A lot of the time, some of these people want the opportunity, want the better opportunity, but they have no idea how to kind of find it, right? And this would be a proposal to kind of put them in that situation where they can find it, of course, in a different way. So I do think there's some appeal to that. It definitely helps in some areas for sure. Any last things that you want to say? Any last kind of things you haven't mentioned that you want to mention as of right now?
Just the most important thing I want to keep reiterating on. The reason why I'm out doing debates, getting on panels, trying to get my name out there is because I want to have this open policy think tank for a YouTube channel. I don't care if I only get 1,000 subscribers at max, as long as they're all people that are on the mission to help perfect this in the policy. So if anyone knows somebody that's in housing that writes policy, that does all any of the things that would help this policy grow, those are the types of people I want. Professionals, working professionals, those are the types of people I want to see this video and come work with me. I also have another idea to kind of close the wealth gap, and it's restructuring of copyright and patent laws to make it so we can promote more competition within the markets. And it's something that would appeal to the idea itself, appeals to left wingers, and the way it would function would appeal a lot to right wingers and raising competition up. I really want to get these out to professionals and turn these raw ideas into practical policy. There's just so many things I touch on here. Like I don't know much about uh, like unemployment law or how the $8 billion that goes to California's homeless people. I need somebody that's an expert in these things to come in, look at my ideas, tell me where I can improve upon them, tell me what wouldn't work just based on the structures of the laws, tell me alternative ideas in order to get to my end goal. I would love people to just come in and rip it apart. Somebody I've been chatting with is a Kano boy since he has an economics degree. I want him to come in and scrutinize the economics of this idea. It's just getting someone to watch an hour-long video where I just talk policy for an hour straight and sit through it and take notes and materialize their argument back and then come give it to me and have another 3 hour discussion about it. It's just such a boring thing for somebody. You really have to have a passion for wanting to get something like this done and also just policy in the first place. It's a hard sell to get people to come take a look at this stuff. But if you know somebody that all this criteria fits them, send them my way. I'd love to talk to them.
All right, sounds good. All this information is obviously on my website, so you can definitely check all that out, of course, at www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. And if anything you found interesting here that you heard of course, and you want to kind of enter the conversation, maybe improve the idea, or provide your own solution, you can contact me via my email on my website as well. So, do appreciate you coming on, Tyler. I thought this was a very interesting proposal. This area is definitely one of those areas that I'm not as knowledgeable about compared to other areas, of course. I know some surface stuff. I know for sure that the housing market is in a very complicated situation. There's really not a easy fix or easy answer to it. It could be a situation where, as the economy kind of gets back on track, then eventually the housing market will kind of get back on track, or we'll just have to wait until it completely crashes and just start all over. So we'll see how that kind of works out ultimately, moving forward. But like I said, if you guys enjoyed the conversation, you guys can rate it 5 stars. You can like and subscribe on the YouTube channel or on any other social media platform that I'm on. Hope you guys did enjoy. Y'all have a good one.